way you love me, cry.
Prepare to experience the strongest radio allowable by law. Secrets will be revealed. Myths dispelled. From the studio gym where excuses never apply, it's Superhuman Radio with your host, Carl Lenore.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of Superhuman Radio. When Alisa and I went to St. Louis for the Gateway to Freedom group, actually a get-together of people who were telling the truth about what happened during the pandemic, I met a guy. And you know when you meet somebody and you just like them right away and you don't know why? It's like, we come from such different worlds. I met Trent Loos. And I said to Alisa, he reminds me of a modern day Will Rogers. He has this way of phrasing things. His wit is very, very sharp. And he uses humor to wrap real serious issues in and delivers it where no one gets insulted. Plus, he can come up with things on demand. I had a trouble stringing sentences together when I was there. I think it was one of the times I was giving up caffeine again. All of you know. And I was just fascinated with him. I thought I had to have him on the show. Because the reality is, while he and I come from completely different worlds, I'm a kid from the streets of Brooklyn, and he's a sixth-generation farmer. We really had a lot in common about the way we looked at things, the way we felt, what we realized the truths were, and who was hiding them from us. So I thought, I got to have this guy on the show. So he's going to join us in just a second. I have to thank our title sponsor, Legendary Foods, makers of the Tasty Pastry. The Tasty Pastry is the Pop-Tart reimagined. Less than 1 gram of sugar, 20 grams of high-quality dairy protein, 4 to 5 net carbs. But more importantly, they taste amazing, so much so that your kids will like them. You'll have to fight your children not to eat them all. They taste like real pastry. They taste like you went to a bakery and picked them up. They taste 1,000 times better than what a Pop-Tart tastes like. And right now you can save 10% if you go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use the code SHR10. Shop around. Legendary also has flavored nut butters that have no sugar in them and seasoned almonds that are delicious. But the Tasty Pastry is a winner. I promise you, if you buy them once, you'll never want to be without them. So check them out. Show them some love. They help make the show possible. And now let me get my guest on. Trent Loos, how you doing, brother?
Well, Carl, I got to live up to all that stuff you started with. I'm a huge fan of Will Rogers, but I'd like to be the modern day Will Rogers. But right now I'm hung up on Legendary Foods.
You like them. I'll get some sent to you. How's that sound? I'll get some sent to you.
See, whining always works. That's why people whine, because you get results.
You learned that when you were a kid, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And some people think you grow out of it. Never stop whining. You'll get what you want. I could take that another step, Carl, but I'll just leave it right there.
I know you were going to go with that. So sixth generation farmer, 300 years your family's been in farming?
Almost 1830. Well, in the United States since 1832. The first Loos came to Adams County, Illinois in 1832. And my family's been taking care of land and livestock ever since. In fact, you know that I do radio and television myself. I understand the importance of a clock. It was a hog that got in between you and me being here on time. So you got to take care of the hogs first. And the hogs come before Carl. That's the moral of the story.
So I'm going to tell you something. When I was on Clear Channel, I had to worry about a clock, but I don't worry about clocks. There's no hard break in the show. I start when I want to start. The fans show up and they sit through it. So don't worry about that. But I remember those days.
That's because you're delivering a quality product instead of just out here selling an infomercial. That's why.
Yeah. Thank you. So, what is it like being a farmer today? You are the voice of rural radio, but your mission is to connect the urban life and the rural life. How do you do that?
It's easier today than it's been in 22 years of trying to get it accomplished, because every single day people see something that alarms them when it comes to food security. I started doing, I'm literally sixth generation. I didn't even go to college because I knew that I was going to be a rancher the rest of my life, taking care of land and livestock. And I don't get hung up on the terms. We don't grow any crops. We produce all livestock. We raise cattle, pigs, horses, few chickens for eggs and things like that. And I think about a farmer as somebody who tends to the land and raises a crop. I think about a rancher as somebody who raises animals, but I don't think that really matters. So I take care of land. We're a man from the land. And it's an interesting time because farm gate prices and what farmers receive has never been higher in my lifetime. In fact, in the history of the world, it's never been. But there is more anxiety and concern about what's happening in agriculture and the farm than ever before, because expenses and the cost of doing business is outpacing what the farm gate prices are. We see beef prices in the retail outlets at up 35%. You go to the most grocery stores across the board, including ground beef, 35% more than you were paying a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago. And the thing of it is, the farmer is getting the same price we were a year ago.
Right.
And so those challenges continue to jump in front of us. And the overwhelming challenge for everybody, if you're a person that likes to eat every day, is the labor situation. Farmers can't find somebody to show up to work. We're now at the heaviest time of year in terms of a labor demand. Harvest has begun across the entire heartland. Finding somebody to show up is a big deal. And then getting a truck driver is a big deal. 60,000 drivers short in the country. We should have 1 million trucks on the road every single day, and we don't because we can't find drivers. And then you go to the next step, the processing facilities. They can't find people to show up and work there either. So the labor situation is really taking a toll on the availability and what's happening in terms of food security.
So it's really costing the farmer and the rancher more money to produce the same output. So who's making the extra 35%?
Mm-hmm. At this point, the 35% number is a beef number. And so there's an interesting dynamic there. Carl, I was in a grocery store in Salt Lake City last weekend, and I took a picture of chicken breast in the store for sale at $9.50 a pound for chicken breast. That's crazy. That's unheard of. So the middleman is the one making the money, because the farmer's not getting paid anymore. The consumer is paying significantly more. The middleman in the middle is the problem. And all of that is a direct result of consolidation at the retail outlets. The largest retail outlets grocery store in this country controls 33% of the retail grocery stores. And as they continue to achieve leverage in the marketplace, because the consumer goes there because it's convenient, they begin to tell the farmer how to farm. And that's not beneficial to producing more with less. And that's really our mantra. I just want to quickly give you this equation because I think it explains a lot of how we got to this point and where we need to go. In 1900, it took 10 acres of land to produce enough food to feed one person for a year. In 2021, I'm going to use 2021 because who knows what 2022 is going to bring about. We're less than a third of an acre to produce the same amount of food that took 10 acres in 1900. And that was accomplished because of the farmer's ingenuity, because of soil health, because of fertilizers, because of diesel fuel. 1 gallon of diesel fuel replaces 500 man hours of food labor production. And in today's world, we try to demonize anything from a petroleum base when in fact it makes your life easier. 500 man hours of food labor production replaced by 1 gallon of diesel fuel. That in itself kind of gives you a nutshell of where we're at today.
That's fascinating. It's funny because fuel is always demonized, but another thing that comes from petroleum is herbicides and pesticides. And somehow in the whole global warming phenomenon, which is, I'm not going to take a side in it. Could we be warming the planet with the fuels that we use? Perhaps, but that's a whole nother story. But it's funny how the companies like Dow and so on, they always sidestep being sucked into that discussion. I don't know how they do it.
Well, they precipitate the discussion actually to create division is what's taking place.
Deflection.
Yeah, spot on. Which brings me back to something. The only thing you said that I'm going to really take issue with you, Carl,
Please.
in your opening. Why in the world would you want to give up caffeine?
It's okay. So in the nutshell, when I was powerlifting, I was using 1,500 milligrams of caffeine a day and hydrous, powdered caffeine. Okay. And I did that for so long that I just really messed up my nervous system. And so I got to get it. Like I had a cup of coffee over the weekend. It wasn't bad, but then I have an addictive personality. I'm a product of the 60s from the city. Drugs, drug abuse was a big problem when I was young. And I have that addictive personality that if a little bit is good, a lot is better. And I pretty much apply that to everything in my life. That's why I've had so many injuries in the gym. But yeah, it's not for me right now. Will it be for me later on? Maybe if I clear my system out for a while and get back to baseline, then I can start doing it again. Yeah, but I abused it.
Well, I'm a person that drinks 3 pots of coffee a day. So I'm not a weightlifter per se, but I follow that regimen because I like coffee. And I bring it up for a reason. There are so many people that when they hear the term chemical, or they heard you just say pesticide or herbicide or whatever the case may be, they're like, oh my God, I don't want any. You know what I do with my coffee grounds, particularly this summer? And I even did a video, Carl, where I showed people how I handled this. You know what I do with my coffee grounds every day?
Put them at the base of your plants. That's what my grandfather used to do. He used to put them on his tomato plants.
Spot on. I had my potatoes. My display this year was I took care of the potatoes. My wife took care of everything else in the garden. And my potatoes had bugs on them one day, and I had forgotten to take my coffee grounds out there and sprinkle them, just like your little light dusting of coffee grounds on the potatoes. I did that 3 days in a row. Guess what happened? The bugs are gone. In fact, I came upon this because years ago I did a research project where I had 1 row of potatoes. I did nothing. I applied nothing to them. I just let nature take its course. And 1 row of potatoes, I sprinkled coffee grounds on them ever so often. 1 row of potatoes, I got to eat. The other row of potatoes, the bugs got to eat. It was that simple.
Right. Yeah, it's amazing.
And so why did every grandma, usually it's grandma that put the coffee grounds in the garden, but it was your grandpa. I'm impressed. You come from a progressive line of paternal.
Yeah, well, they were Italian. They came from Italy, and they grew their own foods. Every year he processed a lamb, and they cooked the skull. I remember we call it capacella. But I remember I could watch my grandfather and my father sitting around and plucking the eyes out and eating it and cracking the skull and eating. And I grew up with that. I mean, I ate tripe as a kid, so we were peasants from Italy, and we ate a lot of polenta. You know, polenta it's cornmeal. You know,
yeah,
so.
I do. So I scalded a pig this weekend. I have pictures, and that's what I did this weekend, kind of similar to the way you grew up, which, by the way, we're coming back to fast. So I think it's a skill that everybody should learn to achieve again. But I don't want to lose track of my coffee scenario because there's a reason coffee grounds work in the garden. Do you know what caffeine actually is?
A methylxanthine, but that's I know. No, what is it? What is it?
It's a pesticide.
Really?
Caffeine's a pesticide that naturally occurs in plants to protect itself from plants. So
from bugs. So in other words,
bugs, exactly.
Nothing eats the coffee bean crops. Then I bet.
Correct. So through the years, I would have such fascinating conversations on airplanes and airports because that's where I get to meet this mental gymnastics of people from every walk of life, right? And they look at me and they're like, "What do you do?" thinking that I'm headed to Hollywood to try out for the next Wyatt Earp
Yeah.
cast, or whatever the case may be. And I tell him I ranch, and so we begin this conversation about ranching and food. And no matter where we start, we always end up with, "Well, I hope you do it organically." Well, no, actually, I don't. And while I'm a believer in all things natural, we have completely hijacked what it means to be organic. So if a coffee plant produces caffeine, a pesticide, to protect itself from insects, is a pesticide a bad thing? No, it's part of nature. And using that part of nature to enhance what it is that we do should be embraced by everybody as part of the mantra of producing more with less. Now, we want to use the least amount of chemicals we possibly can. And the chemical that kills more people in the world every single year than any other, to the tune of 4 million people in the world, is dihydrogen monoxide. 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen.
Water.
Water.
So there was some kids from a university in California that actually wrote a paper that said the link between dihydrogen oxide say it again. How do you say
dihydrogen monoxide?
Yeah, dihydrogen monoxide is the leading cause of cancer. That 100% of people who develop cancer come in contact with it, and they got funded before people realized they were talking about water. I mean, it's really comical. But yeah,
I actually went to a farm show one year, and I found a very attractive young lady, which had nothing to do with the story. It just happened to be she was attractive. And I gave her a clipboard and a petition. And I had a camera that was kind of off scene. They couldn't really see that they were being videoed, but she was wearing a microphone, and she walked around a farm show asking farm people sign this petition to send it to the EPA to ban dihydrogen monoxide, because the same reasons that every kid that's ever had cancer has consumed this chemical. It's now found in all rivers and streams. All baby food contains this chemical. It's just become very intrusive in all of our food. Would you please sign this petition? At a farm show, people who rely on water every single day to grow their crops, 41 out of 43 people signed a petition to ban dihydrogen monoxide.
and yeah,
that was just tremendously educational for me, that anybody, no matter what walk of life they come from, they're susceptible to falling prey to some misinformation if it's presented in a logical way. And it's like, nobody was going to not sign that petition, because I don't want anybody to think I don't care about the environment. I care about the environment. I want to produce more with less. And we've increased soil health. We've reduced the nitrogens. We've reduced the all applications in terms of fertilizer and chemicals that we apply, because we produce more with less. And I want to bring one other example in, because it's something that has been demonized right along with petroleum, and that is coal. If the Department of Energy itself claims, right, you can go find it on their website, that the coal-fired power plant industry that takes coal and converts it into electricity, which is in jeopardy, by the way, because we have relied too much on wind and solar. So now we're only about 30% of our nation's electricity supply comes from coal. Coal has reduced the output of carbon dioxide since 1995 by 27%. It's reduced the output of nitrous oxide by 90% and sulfur oxide by 87%. We're almost to the point, Carl. You know what farmers are now adding to fields where in my lifetime I never had to add this as a component of a healthy soil? Sulfur. Because we took sulfur out of the diesel to protect the environment. We're taking sulfur out of coal emissions to protect the environment. And guess what? We're short on sulfur. We have to physically go add sulfur to our soil to keep it in balance. And the next thing that we're doing that with is carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is a plant food. And if we continue on this path, which we're talking about reducing 3.2 trillion tons of CO2 in the Earth's atmosphere by 2030, 3.2 trillion tons. If you take 3.2 trillion tons of plant food and bury it in the soil a mile deep, what happens to plants?
Right.
It's just simple science, and we have fallen prey. In fact, what does every greenhouse add to their greenhouse to increase plant growth? Carbon dioxide.
I know.
And yet we've been hornswallowed into believing that this is some toxic pollutant.
When my son moved to San Diego, he was in college. He was supporting himself. He was driving. He was an ambulance, working on an ambulance EMT, and he was growing marijuana because he was selling it to he was making like $8,000 a quarter by growing marijuana in his basement. And I know he had to buy CO2 enrichment tanks to keep the CO2 in the basement so they would grow faster. So I never thought about it, but you're right. That's so funny. Okay, so
that's actually the best story I've ever heard.
Yeah, and God bless him. He took his student loans. He paid them off a year ago, and he's so pissed off that the people are going to get help now. He's like, "What about me?" But I said, "Don't worry about it. You're going to get paid in different ways for being responsible." So I'm going to say a name, and I want you to react to it.
Got it.
Bill Gates.
Bill Gates is the 51st largest landowner in the United States. As recently as November of last year, he purchased a 13.5 million acre farm, Campbell Farm in North Dakota, that spans over 2 counties. That is primarily a potato growing farm. Bill Gates has continued to acquire farmland, and many people call him the largest farmland owner in the United States, which is not accurate. And if you question him on that, they say, well, all of the land that he owns is actually tilled. He has no rangeland, he has no forest land. So there are 50 people that own more land than Bill Gates, but what he is doing is dangerous to the food supply because he's buying land, artificially increasing the cost for me. So I don't want to sell my farm, my ranch, right? I want to continue to have it. We have 3 daughters, want the 7th generation to continue on with the land. But the challenge that I have is property tax. We now have people in the state, my home state of Nebraska, paying more in property tax annually than they paid to purchase their ranch or their farm to begin with.
That's horrible.
Think about that. You buy a piece of property. You think you own it.
Right.
You probably borrowed some money at the bank. You paid some interest. And now you pay a tax each year more than what you paid to acquire the land. That is prohibitive. And then let's say you pass away and there's an inheritance tax. And we got a guy named Biden that has ramped up the inheritance tax program again. Mm-hmm. And I can take you to families that have passed, where the individuals have passed in the family. And in order for the next generation to take the ranch and keep it in active production, they have to sell part of it to pay for the taxes. This is a messed up system. And Bill Gates is contributing to that because he and the Bureau of Land Management, I can take you to Casper, Wyoming, where the Bureau of Land Management, part of a government agency within the Department of Interior, just bought a working ranch outside of Casper, Wyoming, paid a time and a half more than it was worth, inflating the cost of land to where you cannot get a return on what it costs, plus increasing the assessed value of all the neighboring land so that they have to pay more in taxes. So this is a trickle-down effect. It's not just what Bill Gates is doing in terms of the ownership of the land, but the ripple effect it has on everybody else who owns property.
Do you know?
Tell you I want to tell you one little more story about Bill Gates, because this is the nonsense that's taking place today that needs to be fixed. So there is a corporate farming law in the state of North Dakota that says that if you're a corporation and you're not a family, so you can be a family corporation and take care of the land, and that complies with the North Dakota anti-corporate farming law. If you're not a family that's taking care of the land, you have to apply for an exemption. And so Red River Trust, which is a Bill Gates trust, purchased this 13.5 million acre farm in North Dakota, Campbell's farm. The Campbells are still leasing it and farming the property, but it's owned by Bill Gates' Red River Trust Shell Corporation. So they had to apply to the Attorney General for the state of North Dakota to get an exemption. There's no way, as the language in the law is written in North Dakota, that Bill Gates owning this property in North Dakota with the Campbells still farming it should qualify for this exemption. But Drew Wrigley, the Attorney General of North Dakota, said, you know what, we're going to go ahead and grant this exemption. Here's the rest of the story. The governor of North Dakota is a guy named Doug Burgum. Doug Burgum at one point in time used to own a business called Great Plains Software. Carl, we'll call this Trivia Question 101. Who do you think purchased Great Plains Software from Doug Burgum?
Bill Gates.
Microsoft and Bill Gates. And guess who then became an executive vice president for Microsoft and Bill Gates? Oh, none other than Doug Burgum. And then in 2016, when Doug Burgum runs to be the governor of North Dakota, I'm going to give you one guess who his largest contributor and financier was in his campaign.
It's incestuous. It really is. It's horrible.
$100,000 Bill Gates gave to Doug Burgum. And all of a sudden now he gets an exemption. That's the kind of thing that leads to the swamp that we all need to have drained.
But they're calling him on the carpet. I saw something this morning. I read an article about that the North Dakota is doing something. They're trying to take some sort of action against him. I just read it this morning, actually.
I'll follow up on that because I've not seen anything new this week on that situation.
But you know, I think you're younger than me, but I'm not sure. I'm not going to ask you your age.
I'm 55.
Okay, so I'm 64. So the Hunt brothers, Nelson Bunker Hunt, Herbert
Hunt Trucking.
Yeah, right. So in the 80s, they acquired 2/3 of all the silver, privately owned silver on Earth. And they tried to corner the silver market. And as a result of that, they literally brought the United States to its knees because they manipulated the value of silver. And I met him because I rubbed horses for Alan Jurgens. I dropped out of high school and went to work at the racetrack, and I was a groom. And Nelson Bunker Hunt owned a horse that I was tasked with taking care of. He paid like a couple $100,000 for. And they were going to try to corner the silver market and control the government. And the government now has a law that you cannot own gold, silver, or any commodity metal to more than a certain point. One person or one organization cannot control it. Why don't they do that with land? I mean, I'm sure Bill Gates isn't growing any. Is he growing anything on this land, or is he just locking it up?
No, he's actually growing. He hires. This is an interesting little scenario, Carl. I'm glad you brought it up. My neighboring county, which is Howard County, Nebraska, it was reported that was part of his 245,000 acres that he owns, a couple parcels in Howard County. So I went to the Howard County courthouse and asked for the assessor's report of the property owned by Bill Gates. And you can get it for $25 because they have to make you a copy. So I got that. And I was very intrigued by the location of the farm management company that manages the property. They have a farm management entity that then hires a local farmer to farm his property. As far as I know, all of his property is actually being farmed, not just sitting idle. But the interesting part of that whole story was that particular farm management company is in the same town in Illinois as Warren Buffett's son farms land at Savoy, Illinois. And I know that there's a Buffett tie to that particular entity as well. So it doesn't matter what turn. It's like the people who have more money than the rest of us, which I don't hold a grudge for that. They made the good decisions, but go be about yourself. Quit trying to ruin my life and turn me into a peasant, which I am. I fail to recognize that I'm a peasant. He
wants to replace meat with these plant-based products that have been shown. We've had scientists on this show talk about plant-based protein products, hamburgers, whatever. They're not as bioavailable. They don't have complete amino acid profiles. They just lose. They lose when compared to real beef. And it's terrible because they want to feed us food that will lead to nutrient deficiencies over time. They don't care that he just wants. I feel like he just wants to control the food supply deep down inside. I really do.
He's invested highly in those alternative protein substances that you're talking about. He's also the largest investor in the world in the cricket business, cricket farming, raising crickets for cricket powder. But I want to go back to something that's just kind of humorous today. That's really not humorous at all. What you're speaking to in terms of the availability of nutrients leads to mental illness.
Oh, I know.
And Dr. Georgia Eade, if you've not had her on, she's a great conversation about how people without the animal proteins and fats suffer when it comes to cognition and mental stability. And I mean, you can't make this stuff up. This past weekend, I don't know if you caught this, but a guy named Douglas Ramsey, who's the COO of Beyond Meats was at a University of Arkansas football game. Somebody backs into a Suburban. He goes ballistic. He breaks out the back window of the guy's vehicle and then bites his nose, rips his nose off.
I read that. That's how desperate he was for real meat, I guess. It's like that. I mean, think about it. Like after he's like, "Oh, that nose looks good. I'm thinking I'm going to take a bite out of it."
Who bites somebody's nose? I mean, there's got to be easier parts to bite.
Yeah, and then plus, bite his cheek. The cheek is beautiful. If you eat cheek meat all the time. They cook that. It's insane what's going on. And then we have idiots like what's her name, AOC, trying to promote this nonsense. And here's the big thing I have with climate change. So if we stopped all emissions today, let's say we had an answer, we just turned that spigot off, and the country was producing no greenhouse gases, no carbon emissions, nothing. It wouldn't make a difference unless China, India, and all these other China and India are responsible for 80% of what is spewed into the environment. It doesn't matter what we do. This is nonsense.
No, actually, if we turned off all emissions, we would die, because each one of those emissions God put here for a purpose. And if we think that we're going to go control them, life will cease to exist as we know it today.
Yeah. We're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, I want to ask you about the stand at Paxton County. I was reading an article that I think is that right? Was that something on your website, or the stand at Paxton?
I was a part of that movie.
Okay. Oh, so that it was a movie. Okay. Well, let's talk about that when we come back. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with more of Trent Loos. Sit tight.
Dogs should be powered by fat and protein, not carbs. That's why Visionary Pet makes low-carb, ketogenic dog food for dogs of all breeds and life stages. From kibble to freeze-dried and even low-carb treats, all Visionary Pet recipes are very low-carb, ketogenic, and made with 100% real meat protein. Shop now and use code SHR for 20% off your first order today. Your dog deserves the lifelong benefits of optimal nutrition. Make the switch to Visionary and see why smart dogs eat low carb.
I would easily say that I am the hugest proponent you will ever meet to doing anything that will improve the quality of my sleep. And that's because sleep is linked to just about every metabolic disorder we see in our population today. One of the easiest things you can do to improve the quality of your sleep is to get a pillow that can be shaped into the exact form factor that allows you to get your best night's sleep. And that is MyPillow. I've been sleeping with MyPillow for a few years now, and I can tell you that when I have to travel and stay in hotels, I don't get a good night's sleep because I don't have MyPillow with me. Right now, you can save up to 60% off of everything offered to improve the quality of your sleep at shrnetwork.biz/MyPillow when you use the code SHR. Or you can call toll-free 800-889-4938. And remember to use code SHR to save up to 60% off of everything at their website. GHKCU is one of the most effective peptides for rebuilding more youthful skin, reversing skin damage, diminishing wrinkles, and tightening loose skin. I personally use Restoracell with GHKCU every day. It's making an undeniable difference in the quality of my skin. Restoracell is fantastic for all types of skin. Now you can order Restoracell and save 25% when you use the code SHR25. That's SHR25. While you may be diligent in your workouts and your diet, don't neglect what people see first and foremost, and that's your skin. Go to shrnetwork.biz/blue and use code SHR25 today. Remember those rectangular toaster pastries you used to love when you were a kid? Well, Legendary Foods has just made them better. The new cake-style tasty pastry is like nothing you've ever had before. With 20 grams of high-quality protein and less than 1 gram of sugar, you'll feel like you're cheating, but you're not. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use the code SHR10 to save 10% off your purchase of tasty pastries. Now available in cookies and cream, red velvet cake, birthday cake, blueberry, strawberry, brown sugar cinnamon, and hot fudge sundae. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use code SHR10 today.
Spit that out right now. This is the Superhuman Channel.
Welcome back. We're talking with Trent Loos today. So The Stand at Paxton County was a movie, huh?
It was a movie. It is a movie. You can watch it on Netflix still today.
And what's it about?
So when I started doing media 22 years ago, I put a tremendous amount of emphasis on the animal rights community because obviously I'm a sixth generation livestock producer. I saw them as a threat. And then what I've learned through the years is that it's not just about improving the welfare and eliminating animals from ownership. It's much deeper than that. We have two organizations, animal rights organizations in the United States, that have annual revenue, just these two, of nearly 500,000, about $480 million a year, $480 million a year. And much of that is illegally used in lobbying efforts. And so we've really targeted and zeroed in on where this money's coming from. Much of that is laundered money coming from outside of the United States to remove animal ownership from humans. That's what the real intent is. I got a phone call one day from a friend of mine in North Dakota who said, Trent, my neighbor is being framed and set up. I'd really like you to look into what's going on. His name's Gary Dossinger. And what happened was Gary had cows and horses, and they showed up, the sheriff showed up, and they were harassing him about how he was treating his horses. And a lot of things happened over a period of time, but ultimately they showed up to remove those animals from his ranch in Stark County, North Dakota. The sheriff was not a constitutional sheriff. He did not do the right thing. He complied with the animal rights community. And Gary Dossinger ultimately went to trial for abusing his animals, which was nothing close to the truth. Well, Forrest Films, which was a production of Forrest Lucas and the Lucas Oil family, had a film company where they were making feature films and did a phenomenal job putting it together. And so they got involved through their organization called Protect the Harvest, which is partners with what I do in trying to empower people to maintain property rights. We put together this film, which is inspired by the true story that happened to Gary Dossinger in Stark County, North Dakota. So I assisted some tremendously creative and talented people in Hollywood in writing this movie. Not a factual movie, but it's inspired by factual events. People always ask me how much of this movie was true. About 80% actually happened. 20% is what they call Hollywood license. Mm-hmm. And then I was geared up to be the sheriff in this movie, because who doesn't want to play a sheriff in a Western, right? Of some sort. And I had executive producer Forrest Lucas all wired into doing this. And then Ali Afshar, who was the producer, the executive producer, he said, Trent, Chris McDonald is going to be the sheriff. He's been in 80 feature films, Chris McDonald from Happy Gilmore. Mm-hmm. I'm like, okay, well, I've never been in a movie. I think that's not going to work. So I did play a part. And that whole long drawn out story, Carl, just really comes back to, I wanted to be a part of a story that told how things are seldom as they seem or may appear to be. You can have the entire community convinced that somebody's an animal abuser, and it's not even close to being true. And we walked through exactly how that happened in the Stand at Paxton. And I'm proud to tell you that it came out May of 2020 on Netflix. And in the first 60 days, it was one of the top 20 watched movies on all of Netflix. So it was received very well. Of course, that May of 2020, people were starting to be confined. And so they were seeking something to watch. But it's been very interesting to be a part of that level of media. And I've learned so much. About 80% of Hollywood is controlled by Dakin Wang, who is from China. And he owns AMC and movie theaters. They have 80% of all the movie theaters in the nation. And so much of the propaganda that comes out of Hollywood is controlled by what the Chinese propaganda machine wants us to believe. And so I've had just enough of a toe in the Hollywood scene to kind of know the good, the bad, and the ugly. But the moral of the story is The Stand at Paxton County is very well written. The actors, Michael O'Neill, he's been acting since 1988. He was my best friend in the movie, and we still maintain communication today. It was a tremendous experience that I'm proud to be a part of.
Is it true that you are running along with Teresa Thibodeau? She selected you as her running mate for governor. Well, she's running for governor, right?
So that was true until our primary. on, I think that was May 7th or May 10th. We did not make it through the primary, but I spent a hard 70 days with her campaigning in the state of Nebraska. And that was a tremendously educational experience to get out in the counties of my home state and visit with people, to rekindle old friendships and meet new friendships. And really, Carl, I like to say that during that period of time expanded the tribe and finding more of us that think alike to go forward. So it was a tremendous experience. Teresa Thibodeau is absolutely a phenomenal individual that does play a part in shaping the future of the political scene, because we need statesmen, not politicians, and she's a statesman.
When you were out there stumping and talking to people, did they all, or were there some people who didn't think that this administration is doing the wrong thing? Did they all feel like, wow, this country's going in the wrong direction? Or were there people out there who said, no, we think it's good, it's go, he's doing a good job, Biden?
So it's not fair to make that analysis in our primary campaign for the Republican nominee to the governor of the state of Nebraska, because the circle that we ran in, those are the only people that showed up. The people that showed up at our events were the people that wanted change, the people that saw what was happening.
Yeah, it was a homogenous group. Yeah,
correct. We did have one event where the Democrat nominee for the governor of the state of Nebraska, where there were some alternative people there in terms of thinking that. And it's just really interesting to get somebody to stand up and say, yes, what Biden is doing is a good thing. I mean, I'm like, are you really paying attention? You think that the inflation that's happening is a good thing? You think that completely destroying what our men and women in the United States military did in exiting Afghanistan was the right thing? There's nothing about this is the right thing. But I do come across those people from time to time, but it's pretty rare in the state of Nebraska.
So what did you learn from them? You know, when you were talking, you said you learned a lot, you know, talking to these people. What jumps out at you that you really felt, wow, I didn't expect that?
You know, I learned the same thing that I learned with the people that think we're all on the same team. You see and hear most often what you think you see and hear rather than what you really pay attention to. We're not really good at paying attention to details. We try to find the agenda that supports our theory, and then we just blindly follow. I try to be somebody different from that. You know, one thing, Carl, I told you that 22 years ago when I started doing media work, it was the animal rights community that really was my impetus. I went to animal rights conventions. That's what I did. That's how I learned what they think. In fact, just last weekend, I mentioned I was in a grocery store in Salt Lake City. I went to Salt Lake City to debate an animal rights activist at the Salt Lake City Veggie Fest. Had about 2,000 vegans running around, and I interviewed them. I visited. Well, I often say that it's time we as a nation grow a pair. That's the bottom line, and we don't live in fear. But I did that from day one. I mean, there is not a leader of an animal rights organization in this country that I haven't met personally and visited with, because the only way you really know what's going on is you get there, you see it, you feel it, you eat it, you drink it, and you understand. You know, I'm the person who's sitting at a vegan restaurant at Alexandria, Virginia, at an animal rights convention with 1,000 people there. I'm eating bacon and eggs, and they're coming over there spitting on my food, you know. But that leads to a discussion, as long as you don't let your neck get red and then you retaliate, and you be a listener and you're respectful in your conversations. And I had an hour and 15-minute discussion or debate, whichever you want to call it, with a guy he's literally one of the leaders in the animal rights community. In fact, next week he goes on trial because he's had 17 felonies against him for stealing animals from farms where he illegally broke into those farms and stole animals that he says he's rescuing. So I'm willing to confront and have a respectful discussion with the people I don't agree with, because I don't learn anything talking to people I agree with.
Yeah, I know. That's good. And did you find any common ground when you talked to him? Was there anything you kind of conceded? Well, yeah, that's because I think factory farming, I think most people today, ranchers, they would probably agree that factory farming really isn't the best thing to hold up as an example of ranching.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up. Because you see, I've been in agriculture my entire life. My family, as we've already been there. I don't even know what a factory farm is. I've owned animals every scenario you can possibly. In fact, Carl, I've cared for 1 million animals in my lifetime. Provided daily care for more than 1 million animals in my lifetime. I've had them out in the environment. I've had them in the most confined facilities. I'm a major proponent of a CAFO, concentrated animal feeding operation. It allows us to, as an owner or a stockman of the animals, your number one job is to minimize stress.
Mm-hmm.
And the number one stressor for any food animal is Mother Nature. And when we can put them in a facility that protects them from Mother Nature, and at some level, we protect them from predators too, depending on what the species and where you're located. But I mean, coyotes, and I lost 25 goats to a mountain lion one August. That's demoralizing.
Right.
They drag them off. It's just a horrible situation. But my job as a stockman is to protect these animals and to keep them at the highest level of immunity possible by minimizing stress. So I feed them right. I protect them from the elements. I make sure that their health and well-being is there. If you keep your immune system, in fact, I mean, you're so well versed on what's going on nutritionally, and we had some phenomenal discussions now 3 weeks ago at the Gateway to Freedom. In 1987, I had a nutritionist working for me that started formulating my swine diets based upon gut health to feed the immune system. Nobody in the human sector, nobody in animal agriculture in 1987 was talking about gut health. Today, it's the whole discussion. But it was 1987 when we were doing that with our pigs. And so every single thing that we do nutritionally, facility-wise, it's all about keeping that animal at the lowest level of stress possible and maximizing the immune health, which then leads to greater performance. So the whole concept of factory farming, I just don't know what a factory farm is.
Yeah, I got you. And you know what I'm thinking? I'm sitting here thinking while you're talking, I'm thinking, so we have a group in this country that feel like it's acceptable to kill a baby at birth because that is reproductive freedom and in the hands of the woman. But when you say to them, this animal was born because of my efforts, specifically to be an animal that we would process someday, and that's not acceptable. Do you see that? Do you see the way people think one way, but they can't see it? Like if you raise an animal, if you specifically breed and calf and raise, my stepfather was he raised tobacco. I mean, he grew tobacco and he raised cows, and he just calls them beef. You get yourself a beef. He didn't even call them cows.
Yeah.
And you know, and it's like, but that cow is alive because of you. So if you can give a woman reproductive freedom to kill a baby, then why can't I raise a cow from scratch and process it when it's old enough? I don't understand what the hysteria is about that.
You just nailed it. In fact, in my 1 and 15-minute debate with Wayne last weekend in Salt Lake City, the only time the audience was ready to grab a lasso, come down there and rip me off the stage was when I talked about how abhorrent it is that we have 41 million babies aborted in the world annually. I think that's the worst of the worst.
Yeah, it's very sad.
And the people in the audience were just livid that I could take that freedom away from a woman with her own body. But Carl, I don't know where we're at on time, but I want to explain this because
we can float. Go ahead, keep talking.
I'm now at the point where I fully understand, because in our discussion, I heard a term that I'd never heard in the animal rights community. And this is not just about the animal rights community. This is about everything that you fight and you try to straighten out on a daily basis on this program and in everyday life. Victim bonding.
Mm-hmm.
They were talking about victim bonding, and the people in this animal rights group, and there's like 2,000 people that showed up at this event, right? And there's a difference. There's people that choose to be vegan, and then there are animal rights activists. And most of the vegans, they think that you need to live like they live because it's become a religion for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens is that what I've determined, for example, one guy tried to explain to me that rape was a natural human phenomenon. and that if we believe in nature, we should be accepting of rape.
Well, then we better be accepting of murder and everything
Correct.
else that goes along with
Correct.
it. Can't
And
be
so
selective. You gotta apply those rules across the board.
So what I figured out is that the people who are the most vehement in the animal rights community and in the environmental community are somehow a victim of some human action. And so they turn to give their love, their sympathy, or their love and their compassion and their communication to that of the animal instead of another human, because some human has caused this problem. And it all comes back to, I got a lot of criticism 20 years ago on radio programs, because I'm actually on the radio in 21 states, about 100 radio stations, 5 days a week. And I would do this segment called From the Doghouse, because I'm concerned that 84% of all pet owners consider themselves to be mother or father of their pet, and that's dangerous to the future of the human race. I have dogs. I absolutely adore and respect my dogs, particularly Claire, my cattle working dog. I don't love Claire like I love my 3 daughters. I don't love Claire like I love another human being. And I think as we have elevated the status of pets to being equal to that of a human, we've caused a disrespect to human life, and it leads to every issue, whether it's a new Green Deal or an animal rights initiative. In fact, if you really want to get down and do the dirty on it, go study what Hitler and the National Socialist Party stood for at every turn. They put in 1939 an animal rights law that eliminated vivisection. It eliminated mistreatment of animals, whatever mistreatment was at the time. I'm not supporting mistreatment. I'm just saying they had a law to do that. They designated a wilderness area where humans were not allowed to be a part of. They wanted to move to a petro-free society. And we're trying to relive all of those things today because we do not respect human life at the level that we should.
I agree with you. And if you look on social media, victimization is almost like a badge. If you go on social media and you talk about how you've been victimized or someone was racist to me, oh my God, the world blows up. But if you post something positive and healthy and happy, it doesn't get the interaction. It just doesn't, because this population today loves to be a victim. People want to be victimized. I don't want to be victimized. I was victimized when I was a kid living in Brooklyn. I got my ass kicked plenty of times. I didn't want to be a victim. It's funny. The people who want to be victims have never really been victims, because people who have really been victims of heinous things, they never want to do that again. And they definitely don't want to play act doing it. Yeah. We're going to take our last commercial break and we'll wrap it up. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Never before has a product been so appropriately named as Botanic Tonics Feel Free. This plant-based elixir combines a variety of different effective compounds, all from raw plant materials that at different doses provide you with completely different experiences. A third of a bottle puts you in the zone and makes you very focused and is ideal for a non-stimulating pre-workout. It also has a mild analgesic effect for us older lifters who have soreness and little pains and aches that keep us from training as ferociously as we want. A half a bottle will create a mild euphoric effect that will allow you to forego consuming alcohol, but still be socially lubricated and have fun. I have never had a product deliver on its name the way Botanic Tonics Feel Free does, and I won't ever be without it, and you shouldn't either. Go to shrnetwork.biz/feelfree and use the code SHR40 for 40% off your first order. I promise you, you will not be disappointed. P3OM from Bioptimizers is a patented prebiotic and probiotic supplement with Lactobacillus plantarum OM. It has now been upgraded to P3OM 2.0 with the addition of a superfood formulation that makes it 2 times stronger, as well as optimizes L. plantarum's strength. So it's more powerful than ever, which means that not only will it help you completely digest all animal proteins, it also reduces cortisol, causes deep relaxation and better sleep, and reduces stress. Go
to shrnetwork.biz/P3-OM today and use the code SHR10 to save 10% off. There are lots of concerns about food supply today. That's why you need White Oak Pastures. White Oak Pastures will deliver food right to your doorstep. You don't even have to go out and be disappointed by shopping in grocery stores. The finest beef, pork, lamb, duck, and more can be found at White Oak Pastures. And now they even have seafood. And best of all, White Oak Pastures has a negative carbon footprint, which means that you don't have to feel guilty for eating your ribeye. Go to shrnetwork.biz/White Oak and use the code SUPERHUMAN to save 15% off. Remember those rectangular toaster pastries you used to love when you were a kid? Well, Legendary Foods has just made them better. The new cake-style tasty pastry is like nothing you've ever had before. With 20 grams of high-quality protein and less than 1 gram of sugar, you'll feel like you're cheating, but you're not. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use the code SHR10 to save 10% off your purchase of tasty pastries. Now available in cookies and cream, red velvet cake, birthday cake, blueberry, strawberry, brown sugar cinnamon, and hot fudge sundae. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use code SHR10 today.
This is the Superhuman Channel, where brawn and brains finally meet.
Welcome back. So Trent, you're a syndicated columnist as well, right?
Actually, I write each week for the High Plains Journal. So I write a column each week, but it's not syndicated per se. It just appears in the High Plains Journal.
So where can my listeners find you if they want a dose of down-home honesty and relaxation? You know, on the
Then you better come to my fire pit right over here.
No, where can they find you on the radio?
Loose Tales Media, LOOSTALES media.com. There's not a listing of my stations there. My stations were constantly targeted if I had them listed. Mm-hmm. But you can hear everything that I do on a radio that's on all of my social media. I'm on Anchor, on Spotify. Rural Route Radio every day is on there. And now I'm doing the Substack, any social media outlet other, Carl, that I'm not doing TikTok because I'm not going to be seen dancing anywhere. But otherwise, you can pretty much find me on any social media outlet. This happened 2 days ago, and I missed it until this moment. They're posing that all problems are now solved for pollution as Governor Newsom in California signed AB 351. Have you heard about that?
No, I have not.
Human remains may now be composted and used as fertilizer.
You know, it's funny. I was just talking about that with a friend of mine, my friend Chris Hill, a war hero. He flew like 45 combat missions in Desert Storm. He came over the house. We had a cup of coffee. That was the cup of coffee I had this weekend, by the way, that I touted on myself. And we were talking about that because he just lost his mother. And I said, my cousin Joe, he has 140 acres in upstate New York. And I'm probably not supposed to say this, but when his dad died, they put his father in a pine box and they buried him there. And I said, this is so stupid that we put remains in a vault and we have, I get it.
I agree.
If you have a concentrated area of dead bodies rotting, okay, I get that. But we should be able to bury, if you have a family farm that's been in the family for 6 generations, you should be able to bury whoever you want there. It's a racket, in my opinion, this whole thing that you got to embalm, you got to buy, shopping for a casket's like shopping for a car. Oh yeah, that one's $15,000. Then you got to put it in a cement tomb. And then you got to pay for all the other stuff. It costs $15,000, $20,000 just to bury somebody. That's why I'm going to be embalmed. I mean, I'm a true conservative. I don't want to take up more space than a bag of ashes, and that's it. And I don't even know who's going to want to keep them around. But this is a racket.
I'm with you. I actually told our 3 girls and my wife, Kelly, of 29 years, I said, when that day comes, just drag me out back and let the coyotes have their way because I want to go back to the dust. And, of course, they thought that was ludicrous, and I could never even repeat that. But that's a true story. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust.
The Taoists, that's what they do. When you die, they wrap you in muslin, and they take you out, and they cut you up, and they throw your limbs out for the vultures to eat. Mm-hmm. I mean, that really is the way it should be, because then you really do go back. It's
I
crazy.
agree. It'll take a couple days for the caffeine to wear out of my system so that everything will eat it, but otherwise it'll be good.
Yeah, that's right. Nothing will be able to eat you because you have so much caffeine in you. That's funny.
Yeah,
They'll
which
come
is
back-
why I go to wherever I go. The girls are always saying, "Dad, you want some off or some bug spray?" No, I'm good. They don't bother me.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Yeah, you know, if they'll throw you out in the field, they'll come up the next day. You'll be sitting up with a coffee pot next to you. So, listen, it's been fun. I really like you a lot. I liked you the minute I saw you. I knew that you were the genuine article, and I really do mean that when I said that you remind me of a modern day Will Rogers, because you have that sensibility, but you have that honesty and that unapologetic attitude, and I love that about people. I like real people. You know, real people piss you off, and that's okay. But real people you can embrace because you know who they are. Growing up in the streets, you are always worried about the people that you couldn't tell who they were, because those were the dangerous people. So thank you for making time to come on the show today.
That childhood lesson you learn right there is still the thing we have to deal with as American citizens today. Who can you trust and who can't you trust? Trust somebody you can look in the eye and say, "You're wrong, and here's why," and then go forward.
Well, and
Carl,
our big
it's been a pleasure, and you got to come and join me on my TV program now.
Oh, I would love that. And then one other thing I wanted to say. Today, to be a successful politician, you have to be comfortable looking into the camera and lying blatantly. I did not have sex with that woman, Monica Lewinsky. It started then, and it's gone downhill ever since. Take care, brother. See you soon.
Thank you.
Okay?
See you soon.
All right, take care. And that's it for today. Please share the show. You never know who you're going to help. And we will see you with more Superhuman Radio soon. I'm confused about our calendar right now. I don't know if we have a show tomorrow. I know we're not on the air Thursday and Friday because I got big things to do with Gun Leash Thursday and Friday. But we'll see you soon. Take care.